Thank you everyone for joining us for our OYC webinar series. I'm happy to have Ranju and Adam from Pekarsky Co with us today. Thanks everyone for joining. I just want to remind you can ask questions all throughout the webinar. We'll try to address them at the end after the presentation they have prepared for us. But yeah, feel free to fill them out as we go so we can be prepared at the end. So thank you, Adam and Ranju, for joining us. Off to you guys.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Gabe, and hi, everybody. It's our goal to get through the topic of recruiting and onboarding virtually quickly and leaving some time at the end for any questions you might have. But as Gabe said, don't hesitate to send questions along, and we can answer them as we go. Quick introductions. So I'm Adam Pekarsky. I'm the founding partner of Pekarsky Co. I'm a recovering lawyer. Originally got out of that in 2001 and have been recruiting ever since. So coming up on 20 years, and this last few months is definitely among the more challenging, but also lots of opportunity. Started Pekarsky Co in 2009. So we're in our 11th year. We're proudly Calgary owned and operated, big champions of the chamber and of anything that is buy local, and very involved in our local community. And we lead searches across virtually every industry, every function. And our office is located right downtown on Stephen Ave, and we look forward to getting back there one of these days soon. But until then, like you, we're living a virtual life, and we're making the best of it. So Ranju, I'll turn it over to you for an intro and to get us started.
You bet. So, hi everyone, I'm Ranju. I'm one of the partners with Pekarsky Co. I actually joined the firm and when Adam first opened the business in 2009, and I've been here ever since. I've worked on the all types of searches that we've conducted here. So we'll get started. We're going to tackle recruitment to start with. So recruiting is a team sport. So if you are or have been lucky enough to be hiring through this pandemic, you've probably realized that it feels really good to connect with people on a much deeper level as we all work through this self-isolating environment. We're surrounded by global scales of uncertainty and fears. And so, things look and feel much different, but we're pleased to share some of our insights we've learned as we've actively worked with our clients and candidates. One thing we know for sure, recruiting effectively virtually right now requires double the effort, double the attention, and double the empathy, which is very important. Next slide, some of the issues that we're dealing with. Not many of us have yet returned to their offices since mid-March, and a lot has changed since then, particularly in Calgary and Alberta. We know in the past here in this city, we have glorified hustle, and it's been a pace of go, go, go. So perhaps right now is the time to sort of rethink and reevaluate careers and work environments, business strategy, and leadership culture. We know as recruiters, we're going to see a refresh out there, and whether you're a hiring manager or a job seeker, we need to be thinking about creating future employment that may very well look different and feel differently. So for job seekers and candidates, if you're a candidate looking for new employment right now, take the time to learn and invest in yourself. If you want to develop skills in a new area or apply your skills in a new sector, really think about what you're passionate about, what really drives you. And once you do that, look at your brand documents, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, social media. How do you reframe your brand and build it out? And also make sure you stay on top of relevant business and employment trends. Explore and expand your network and stay connected in a more meaningful way rather than a transactional manner. So business leaders need to be thinking of ways their business environments and recruiting needs are changing. Are there new roles or functional expertise that would add value to your business? Are your employees coming into the office? Are you anticipating support needed for mental health issues, from healthcare concerns, stress related to layoffs and schooling of your kids, lack of family travel? This is where we're thinking we may see new positions, such as a chief health and wellness officer, being created for organizations. We know certainly boards will have a heightened sense of organizational risk issues. Maybe they'll be focusing on CEO succession planning. But there's all sorts of creativity that's happening at this point.
Yeah, I would just add on that point that we've seen this before. Just as Y2K gave rise to a boom in IT roles, and the financial crisis gave rise to a boom in compliance roles. I think in a year or two from now, we might be looking back on a whole COVID industry, frankly, and not wanting to sound unempathetic toward the situation. There's opportunity in every crisis, and it's going to be on employers and employees to figure out how to leverage that. So.
Mm-hmm. We want to talk about in terms of recruiting to Calgary at this time. Be aware of brand issues as they may relate to Calgary and Alberta, and talk about, our city's resilience and attractions. Things like, we have a top research university, we support innovation, we have lots of privately funded startups in technology and cannabis, a highly qualified workforce, cheap power, affordable housing, access to mountains. Don't forget, we're an entrepreneurial, inclusive community. We have the ideal conditions for businesses to be based in Calgary and operate worldwide. And we can be like other cities that have made a comeback after, economies have crashed, where city leaders come together to envision a diverse and all-purpose city.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that employers who live here might take a little bit for granted is that it's a lot harder to sell Calgary right now than you might think. And we can all make the argument around lower cost of living and access to the mountains and all these other benefits that we all know. But we need to be very honest with ourselves and know that from other points in Canada, right or wrong, I would submit wrong, Calgary is perceived a little bit as damaged goods a little, and so we need to work doubly hard when we're recruiting people to our city from afar. We all know the advantages, but we can't assume that everyone else sees them as advantages too. So this whole notion of doubling your effort, it's really critical. We've all seen it in our daily lives around this virtual environment that we're living in, and I think that we need to be very conscious and purposeful about our active listening. And if we're on Zoom, that emphasis on really appearing to be listening and engaged with what our audience is saying is much more paramount. You don't want to just, especially on a group panel type interview, when there's multiple interviewers, you might have 5 or 6 little boxes on your screen, and you have to engage with all of them, just as you would in a panel interview. And we have the benefit on Zoom of moving our cursor, or on Teams, whatever the platform is, and seeing the names of the individuals in each box. And so just as you would in a panel interview, where you might lay out their business cards in front of you as a bit of a cheat sheet for who's who, you can do the same on Zoom and address people by their name and work doubly hard to pull everybody into the conversation. If Jill asked a really good question, but now it's Stan's turn to talk, you can keep Jill engaged by saying, I just want to pick up on something that Jill asked me. You would do that in a normal interview, but the importance of doing it in a Zoom virtual platform it just goes way up. Obviously, this is kind of motherhood and apple pie stuff, but you've got to be well lit. You've got to be professional in your dress. You've got to be mindful of your background. You want to convey, it's tricky because if you show up in a suit and tie in your living room, that might look a little bit odd if you're interviewing on Zoom, but I would just advise that you clarify ahead of time before the interview. Don't be shy to send an email and say, what are your expectations of dress code? Because it could almost backfire on you if you're sitting in your living room and you're dressed to the nines and your panelists are more casual. You don't want to inadvertently embarrass your interviewer by being out of step. So don't be afraid before the interview, just as you're confirming time, to say, I'm just want to make sure we're aligned on things like dress code and expectations. So again, it's doubling your effort. You might not normally ask that question, but this isn't a normal time. So you've got to just err on the side of being doubly sure of every step of the process.
And there's definitely a blending of, everyone's working from home, so we get it. It's just a blending of personal home life and your work life. So we know that there's, quite often distractions that occur during these Zoom meetings or interruptions that you don't see coming. So interviewers could maybe put candidates at ease right at the beginning and say, hey, I know we're working from home. So, just to put them a bit more at ease that there may be interruptions on both sides. So.
Yeah, and I think that leads to this last bullet point, which is don't be afraid to keep it authentic. I recall a few months ago, Ranju needed to bring her dog into the office for various reasons, and yeah. we were on a very formal video conference meeting with a very buttoned up Toronto organization, and we were like going to great pains to keep the dog out of view. We failed, and they noticed the dog, and it actually caused a laugh. But I would say right now, you have to just own that. And we're all authenticity and more likability, and that's really the last point we're making here is try to avoid the usual fluffy intro type questions. How are you doing? How was your weekend? And get into a bit more of a personal exploration. How are you spending your time? How are you coping? What are you doing in this environment? And it's okay to go there sooner than you might otherwise have gone there in quote unquote normal times. Again, there's a real emphasis, I would say, on demonstrating trust. Both employers and job seekers have to convey that they can be trusted. So a job seeker in normal times would go to great pains to show that they were a cultural fit and that they were culturally aligned with the organization. That is still important. But when you're not physically together, you can almost add one more element of cultural fit, and that is that you can be trusted. And we'll talk a little bit about that more when we get into onboarding. Similarly, employers, you've got to convey that in a virtual environment, you're going to be able to find that balance between holding your employees accountable while not looking over their shoulder every hour. And it's a balancing act. You don't have the luxury of walking down the hall and checking in on someone. You have to trust them. So we all sort of are going to need to be imagining our new future and what that looks like. We're all figuring this out day by day by day. At Pekarsky Co, we work in a 2-story building with no elevator, and no other tenants in our stairwell, really. So that's a very different consideration than someone working in Bankers Hall that has to think about riding the elevator 45 floors with multiple other tenants, and things like fire drills and landlord communications with their tenants around expectations. And these are all the new realities, and we can't allow ourselves to get frustrated by those things. We have to show that we have the nimbleness and the adaptability to roll with them. Otherwise, they will get layered into that cultural misalignment. If you're seen to be unwilling or unable to follow along the directives of either the landlord or the employer, that will be a sort of cultural strike against you. Other areas like job sharing and being prepared to keep an open mind to flex hours or changing the way we travel. Employers might have to be more open to looking at things like car allowances or paying for fuel or things that they might not have otherwise done as we pivot into a new way of doing business. And frankly, those in-demand skills, Ranju, that you talked about earlier, adaptability, being able to show that you are tech savvy. If you've never worked on GoToMeeting or Teams or Zoom, just figure it out and show that you're able to figure it out, because that will be all part of the way forward.
And when I would just add, when interviewing, leaders of organizations will really have to clarify what they see as their vision for the workplace that you're being hired into, the workplace and the culture. So be it, flex hours or working from home or shift work or what have you, because you have to make sure that the candidates that you are interviewing clearly understand your expectations and are aligned with that vision, especially now that people are getting accustomed to working from home. So if you're an employer and you want people in the office, don't be shy to say that. Because you have to clarify those expectations up front.
Yeah. Thanks, Ranju. A couple other quick points, more tactical in nature, and I am seeing a couple of questions come in, and I'll make sure that we address those. But on the recruitment side, just around tactics, it actually, in many respects, has never been easier to recruit for roles. One of the biggest impediments to recruiting is the logistics and the scheduling. And in a Zoom environment, it can be quite a lot easier to tee up interviews in a back-to-back fashion. You can do team interviews. Someone can drop off, leave you alone for another set. So let's embrace the ease that the technology gives us to interview from a scheduling perspective. You don't have to factor in being seen interviewing for a job. We all used to joke in the old days about if you're in a casual work environment and you show up one day and you're dressed for an interview, it would raise eyebrows. From a recruitment firm perspective, being seen with one of our team members in the plus 15s is always perceived to potentially be risky given what we do for a living. But all of that confidentiality piece has just been made much easier by virtue of the technology. But we have to offset that with Zoom fatigue and this notion that we're all spending hours and hours and hours staring into a computer screen, and it's tiring. And we have to balance that the old 10-minute walk through the plus 15 to get from your meeting at 10 that ended at 10:45 to get to your 11 o'clock meeting, we don't get that breather. We don't get that leg stretch. And so it can be very, very tiring. And if you're interviewing, you have to just be mindful of that. We would also, from a tactics perspective, encourage everyone to embrace the video and not just the phone. It's actually never been more important to see the proverbial whites of their eyes. While we can't assess the person with a handshake or the vibe we get it being in the same room with them, at a minimum, we have to be able to see their facial expressions and get a gauge for the individual. So if at all possible, don't do the interview, from your car over the phone. Find the time and sit down in a quiet place and stare into the screen. As awkward as it is, it's going to become, I would just throw this out. Ask yourself, how much more comfortable are you today than you were even a month ago in this platform? And I think the answer is we're all a little bit more comfortable. So how much more comfortable will we be another month or 2 or 3 or 4 from now? Couple other just tactics. I think in a post-COVID or current COVID world, interviews are less transactional and more conversational. Be mindful as an interviewer to be less inquisitorial, if that's a word, and create more of a dialogue. We have to be more empathetic in the way we approach our dialogue with people and less transactional. That'll lead to a better outcome. We put here, virtual coffees. There's lots that can be done outside of a formal interview. So for example, if in a normal world interview, you meet as your first interview, maybe you meet the HR business partner, and now the person you'd be reporting to wants to have a quick coffee with you. In the old days, that would have been a coffee. Well, it can still be a coffee. I have one right here and I'm sipping it like that. And so we can do that in a virtual environment, just as we used to do it in person, to create a sense of normalcy, and that'll help you put your best foot forward. A few quick final considerations, and Ranju, jump in if there's anything I'm missing. But for the job seeker, it's and a lot of this you've heard before, but we'll just say it very quickly. You've got to sustain your network. I was just on a webinar myself this morning put on by LinkedIn, and they were saying that their level of engagement on LinkedIn has gone way up. We've seen it as a firm at Pekarsky Co. Our followers and our following has gone, I think, Ranju, we're up 300% since April 2nd.
Yeah.
And the metrics are there. And so take advantage of the engagement, the number of eyeballs that are on your LinkedIn, and then capitalize on those new eyeballs by keeping them captivated, by producing good thought leadership, by producing good content, by being a good social citizen, liking, sharing, commenting, and really sustain that network, because you have a unique opportunity. You have a captive audience that's looking at you otherwise been looking at. Seek out pro bono opportunities. Not-for-profit boards are always looking for people who've got good ideas and a commitment to the cause. Volunteer on boards. Make sure that your LinkedIn and your resume are current and relevant. Make sure that you've got the right words in there that will make you more findable and more relevant to today's marketplace. I'll give you a quick example. Sometimes we still see on resumes, people say that they're proficient in Word and Excel. Well, that is no longer something worth celebrating on a resume. That is now table stakes, and it is expected. And so there's maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, being proficient in those things would have moved the needle. Not anymore. And so we have to continually think about things like that. And obviously, if you're a job seeker, you got to apply for jobs. It sounds trite, but you need to be very, very active, and if nothing ventured, nothing gained. And finally, you've got to develop new skills. You have to show that you are employable in the new economy, such as it is. A couple quick things about onboarding, and then we'll sort of deal with some of these questions that are coming in. Onboarding is difficult in the best of times, and frankly, I'm sure present company on this call excluded, most organizations are not particularly good at it. It is made much more difficult in a virtual environment. It's an opportunity, though, to show creativity, to do virtual video tours. So, for example, if someone is going into the office right now, and most of us have someone going into the office, why not take a GoPro or just take your iPhone and do a tour of the office while you can, and show people the kitchen, and show people some of that, if you've got a foosball table or something fun, or even a future empty office that could be your next hire. Drag it into iMovie, put it to music, and have that be part of your onboarding process. I think you can do virtual first day lunches. I mean, the first day lunch has always been a big part of onboarding. Why should that change? Why could you not organize a skip the dishes and have the team with whom the new hire will be interacting sit in front of their computer at home and have a virtual first day lunch. There are also certain concessions you need to make. It might not be like it used to be around things like computer training. We actually hired a guy on April 6th, 3 weeks into the pandemic, and he had never been into the office. He'd maybe come in once to visit me, and we have onboarded him. It has certainly not been our usual rigor. In fact, we didn't even train him on our CRM tool because we just didn't think that was the right use of time. Rather, we're sort of MacGyvering a solution to allow him to put relevant information into our CRM tool by leveraging people who already know how to use the tool. And when the time is right, and that might still be in a virtual environment, but maybe it won't be. Maybe we'll be back in the office. We will check the boxes of the normal onboarding schedule when it's easier to do so. You kind of have to pick your battles. But the most important point of all is that you have to be very, very deliberate in developing a strategy. It's going to take twice as much effort and time to do it well and do it properly as if the person was in the office. And so you just have to really, really be intentional. There's really two main issues to address, and I'm just going to get through these in the next minute. You have to address logistical issues and support, and then you have to address the issues of building relationships quickly with the right people. So on the logistical issues and support, equipment, access, and training are the big three. And so you've got to consider these issues before the employee starts. Remember, the IT team is probably working from home as well. So if they're ordering a new computer for you and loading it with the relevant software that you need to do your job, what's the protocol for equipment as it changes hands? If they're providing you an iPhone or some kind of a personal device, you know, how many sets of hands have been on it? Has it been properly sanitized? How are we delivering it to you? These are the sorts of considerations we need to think about when it comes to your equipment, the tools you need to do your job. Access. We've got to figure out access and the required, you know, what's required before an employee begins. You know, we made the decision to give our new hire a key fob, so he had access to the office, even though potentially none of us were around the office when he came in. That gets back to our earlier point about trust. So you have to make these decisions on a case-by-case basis, depending on your rules and your HR policies and how big an organization. We would strongly encourage, whether you have an internal IT department or you rely on outside providers, that you assign an IT member dedicated to the new employee, just more so than ever, to help troubleshoot and make sure that they're getting up to speed on both the hardware and the software. And then on the training piece, take the time now to develop those electronic versions of important company documents. Maybe do a welcome video from the CEO or from each various functional head, depending on how big the organization is. You might as well record that now, put it in the can, and then be able to roll it into your onboarding regimen. And you're just going to have to provide virtual sessions to replace the traditional orientation that we've all become accustomed to. But again, we view that as an opportunity to be creative. On the relationship piece, and I think this is the last slide. There's really 5 key constituents that you need to be mindful of when it comes to relationships. There's the hiring manager, the direct reports, a mentor, your peers, and then representatives in key functions. And we're going to be providing you with the deck, so I won't go through every single bullet point, but you know, obviously a couple of things I want to emphasize. The hiring manager needs to be in very close contact, more so than ever, with the employee throughout the hiring and onboarding process. And you don't need an agenda every single time. We had a call last week where, I think it was on Tuesday, I sent a Zoom link around to everybody in the firm and said, hey, I don't have an agenda. I just want to see how everyone's doing. Just check in, say hi. And we actually had a really good, quick half-an-hour touch-in, just as we would if we were in the office standing around talking about our weekend over a coffee. So don't think that there needs to be a thing to talk about in order to have a quick conversation. You got to, again, double your efforts on communicating the news of the new hire to the rest of the organization, and use video and use creative means of doing so. Over communicate, over meet, and then in addition to all of those informal check-ins, make sure, of course, that you are doing the formal check-in at the end of the first week, end of the first month. How's everything going? You've just got to be doubly aware of what's going on. Direct reports, same sort of idea. Schedule check-ins, meet with new employees. There should be, if you don't have a mentoring program, I think this notion of a culture carrier, it's not an original idea, but it's something that there should be a mentor now more than ever who can speak to the cultural expectations and norms of the organization. Because without being able to walk through the halls and breathe the air and talk to people at the water cooler, it's going to be more important than ever. And then peers. Informal gatherings, depending on the culture of the organization, your peer group, you should really be providing the ability to have virtual post-work wine or beer, or a mid-morning coffee, or whatever it takes. And then I would say more important than before would be representatives in key functions. So making sure that HR, finance, and IT in particular are paying very close attention to the new hire, as that's where the bulk of the questions are going to come from. I'll leave this screen up. I would just say a couple of things relevant to chamber members in particular is until June 30th, our firm has very aggressively reduced pricing. We rolled this out in early April for all chamber members, big or small. If you are doing any recruiting, we can help you on a reduced fee basis. And we're also being very successful with secondments. And so we can second one of our recruiters who aren't as busy as they were in normal times, to be candid. And we can arrange a secondment where we can actually have them essentially as part of your team. You might not have the budget for even reduced fees from a recruitment firm, but you could avail yourself of the expertise of one of our team members. So I leave you that little plug. And let me get here to a couple questions, and Ranju, I'll read these. The first one, as we move forward, have you found that you have had to restate the value of the work you do as many businesses look at their expense side? That's a great question, and the answer is yes. But we do that all the time. I think you can never stop reminding the marketplace of what you do and the value that you bring. And you can never stop doing that, even in a good economy. But you have to temper that with looking the risk of looking tacky or looking tone deaf or looking out of touch with your environment. Given what we do as a recruitment firm, you call us if you have a need. Save for a couple of exceptions, it's very hard for us to engineer a need if you don't have one. And so we just have to create awareness and remind you that we're here so that when you need us, you call us. And that requires even more effort during a downturn. But, the question said, as businesses look at their expense side, the reality is in Calgary, businesses have been looking at their expense side for the last 6 years. And so this is nothing new for us. Ranju, anything to add before I get to the next couple questions?
I was just going to say, through this pandemic, we have not focused so much on a sort of business development and sales, but rather we've been partnering with our clients and candidates. We've always been trusted advisors to our clients, and through this pandemic, it's been very important for us to carry on that sort of service and that sort of offering. So we have really been there for support and stayed in touch with our clients and asked them, what needs they may have through this and how can we support them, whether that be a sort of virtual roundtable for sort of high level strategic discussions with their peers so that they can learn from each other how to carry on their business and what to plan for through this time.
Yeah, No, that's a great point. So yeah, we can add value and justify that value in many, many ways other than just the transactional. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Two more questions that have come in. What should the narrative externally for Calgary be to effectively attract talent here? That's a great question, but the reality is that no matter how beat up we are, there's still nowhere else I'd rather be. And the cost of living argument, frankly, and I'll speak very candidly here. We've tried to recruit Vancouver people to come to Calgary, and some have made the move. But at the end of the day, even though you can sell the argument that they can sell their house there and put money in their pocket while buying a bigger house here, they still perceive it as moving from Vancouver to Calgary, and that in their mind is still something that they are reluctant to do because we don't as yet have an ocean in Calgary. And so the preference is just, you can't get them to make the emotional leap, even if they can get their head around the financial business case. But there are people who are still looking to move to Calgary from other centers, be it Edmonton, be it Red Deer, be it Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and I expect we may see an influx of US interest in Calgary once again, as there's always been a natural pipeline between Houston and Calgary and Denver and Calgary, and that will continue in a post-COVID environment, perhaps even more so depending on the results of fall elections in the US, not to get political. So I think the narrative hasn't changed. We still don't have a PST. We still have a very reasonable cost of living. We still have all kinds of virtues and values that make Alberta and Calgary a great place to live, and a highly educated and useful workforce. And give a plug to the Chamber and also Calgary Economic Development, who have great resources and statistics on their various websites for selling the Calgary story. But the point we were making is simply that you can't take it for granted that people know the story. You have to remind them of the story. Last question, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock as well. Is the recruitment cycle longer now, given that we are virtual? As a candidate, how do I stay connected with the hiring firm without being overeager? So I'll take the first part of that, and then Ranju, I'll let you take the second, or add on to the first. But and there's more questions coming in. This is great. The recruitment cycle is actually shorter. I would submit it's not longer. We have, during this pandemic, and I speak, Ranju can talk about this briefly, but led a CFO search for the convention center from open to close in 3 weeks, and that was during COVID. And there's other examples of senior level searches that we have executed, partly because of the ease of scheduling, people being available, people being in front of their computers, etc. So yes, the recruitment cycle has not lengthened, it has shortened. In terms of the second part of your question, I don't know, Ranju, if you want to take a stab at it. As a candidate, how do I stay connected with the hiring firm without being overeager? I mean, that's an age-old challenge.
Yeah, that's sort of where you have to build that trust and credibility with the recruitment firm that you're working on. Like, I know, in our firm, we are sort of make that extra effort to be quite transparent and stay connected with both our candidates and clients. And we really value candidate care in that manner. We treat them just as well as clients. So it's really just establishing that relationship with the firm that you're working with.
And I think the question specifically asked about the hiring firm, so the organization itself. And if I misunderstood the question, I'll just speak to that very briefly. The best advice I can give you around email correspondence or phone correspondence and being worried about being overly eager is ask for permission. Don't end a phone call or an email string without asking for when the next one can be. And I think if you're worried about being too eager and you call and you check in and say, hey, I'm just calling to see the status, I interviewed a week ago and I haven't heard anything, You'll get a response, and at the end of that dialogue, be it on email or phone or LinkedIn, whatever, just say, great, I appreciate the update. Would you mind if I checked back on Tuesday if I haven't heard from you by then? And that gives you license to then check back on Tuesday, reference the previous correspondence, and you don't look too eager. But use your judgment. We all know when we're sort of getting a little bit too aggressive in our outreach, but you also don't want to risk losing out on something by being too cautious. Remember, it's all about doubling up your effort, doubling up your intensity. And my advice, if you're a job seeker, is you'd rather want to err on the side of being a little too ambitious than a little too passive, because you need a job. Question just came in: how do I, as a candidate, get a sense of culture and fit as this is all virtual? I know you mentioned that trust is important, but how do I, as a candidate, get a sense of trusting my potential new boss? Well, we're running out of time, and that's a question worthy of a lot longer exploration. But and our emails are down below on the slide you're looking at, so feel free to reach out. But the short answer is, it's going to require you to really be more acutely in tune with what you're hearing and what you're seeing on the Zoom call. I would submit there aren't too many things that don't come through the screen that do come through in person when you're trying to assess, what your boss might be like. And I think if you follow the rule around being a little more authentic and not being afraid to put yourself out there and ask some questions that you might not normally ask of a future boss, like, for example, how do you plan on, communicating constructive criticism to me in a virtual environment? Is that, would we get together at a safe social distance and convey it to me in person? Would we do it over the phone? I'm just curious, Mr. or Mrs. Future Boss, what's your communication strategy going to be with me as an employee? Like, you would never ask that in a boardroom setting because you would never think to ask it. But now I think we have license to go there. And if anything, I would submit that you have more of an opportunity because of that license to ask questions that you wouldn't normally get to ask. Better culture than you would have simply by getting a tour of the office. I don't know, Ranju, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, no, the only other thing I would add is that's why
go ahead, Ranju.
We also suggest having multiple rounds of interviews to get a better sense of the culture of the organization or the leadership and get a feel for, to build that better trust. And that should be with your peers of the position or other direct reports of your supervisor. But just, try and get multiple rounds of interviews to collect those sort of data points and build that trust.
Perfect. So, Gabe, I'm not seeing any new questions come in, so I don't know. I can turn it back to you to sign us off. But as I say, you've got our website and our emails below, and as I said, there's chamber pricing until June 30th if you do have recruitment needs, and even if you just want to call and pick our brains, that we're happy to do at no cost. So thank you for listening today and for your questions. And Gabe, over to you.
Thank you so much, Adam and Ranju, for joining us today. I think that was very valuable, and thanks for offering your contact there for anyone listening. Just a reminder that this was recorded and will be available on our website within 24 hours. So if you want to share with your colleagues and friends and maybe anyone you want to, just reach out to us or find it on our website. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.